For this oil change, we need a fresh filter, 2 quarts of motor oil, and a funnel. We will also be needing gloves, lots of paper towels, a torque wrench, and a clean oil drain pan so we can analyze the old oil for metal particles. Warm the engine oil enough to ensure no contaminant settling, yet not hot enough to scald the skin. Begin by loosening the oil filler cap. We will start with the down tube drain bolt. When the down tube drain bolt is far out enough, you can use it to block the oil flow so that it comes out at a controlled rate. Use a wrench here if draining very hot oil. Once the oil slows to a drip, move the drain pan over. If you have a skid plate, prop the bike up so the oil will fall through the guard drain hole more easily. Once the drain bolt is loose, use the extender and socket to slowly remove the bolt and control the flow of oil. If allowed to flow freely, a lot of oil will get trapped between the skid plate and frame and create a mess. When the flow begins to lessen, pull the plug and allow the crankcase to drain fully. Taking the bike off the prop now will allow complete removal of old oil. This is a good time to shine a bright light on the oil and check for metal particles. It's not necessary, but if the oil is not too hot, one can also check the color by allowing it to run over light-colored gloves and check for graininess as an indication of oil contamination. Once the oil is completely drained from both areas, we can torque up the bolts to the specified values. Before installing the bolts, check each washer and replace if necessary. Using a torque wrench will make certain proper tightening. Try to remove any residual oil to keep the area clean. Check the torque spec and tighten up the crankcase drain bolt as well. Before removing the old oil filter, set down some paper towels to catch the overflow of oil. Then, take out the 3 8mm bolts holding on the filter cover. Once the filter is out, give a quick wipe down. Then, pull out the small spring. Removing all of the oil in the oil filter area will help keep the new filter clean for longer. To reinstall, start with the spring, then insert the new filter with the cavity facing outward. As we can see here, it matches up with the oil passage in the filter cover. Also notice there are marks on the filter cover and engine cover that line up with each other when the orientation is correct. When putting the filter cover on, rub a little bit of oil onto the rubber gasket to maintain a good seal, and continue with installation. Wiping down this area is important so that after the first test ride it's possible to check for leaks to make sure the cover has a good seal. If it's been a while, it may be a good idea to check the oil strainer bolt. First, take off the front bolts holding on the skid plate, and then proceed with the skid plate itself if necessary. On occasion, the Allen heads get filled with gunk from riding, so picking it out will aid in uninstallation. You may also want to remove the brackets to the skid plate as well. Now that we have access, remove the joint nut first. The oil pan will be needed for this process. Next, remove the oil strainer nut, which is connected to a filter screen and has a rubber O-ring. This can be done using a socket wrench as well. If needed, clean the screen in solvent and blow with compressed air. Before reinstalling, check the O-ring for damage. Next, check the torque spec and tighten the oil strainer nut. Then, follow up with the oil joint nut and tighten. Alright, reinstall the engine guard or skid plate brackets, and then the plate itself. Installing the bottom bolts first and leaving it slightly loose to install the front bolts will make things a bit easier. Fully tighten the 2 front bolts, followed by the bottom bolts. Time to fill the engine with some motor oil. Fill with just 1 quart, then tighten down the dipstick and start the engine to allow oil to circulate through the system and into the new filter. After a minute, shut down the motor and you should find a dry dipstick. Next, fill with 3/4 of the 2nd quart and recheck the dipstick. A little bit on there. Usually takes about 2 quarts total, but you always want to start with less and work your way up to the middle point. When you get close, pull the bike up straight to get a real measurement from the dipstick and check the level. The level here is just below the middle mark. Time to take the bike for a test ride to get the oil up to operating temperature, and when you get home, let the oil settle for 5 minutes and check the dipstick one last time to make sure your oil quantity is within the recommended level.